Before empire, there was chaos. 1,000 tiny kingdoms, hundreds of different languages. Ancient India was a land of cultures. Yes, but also a land of constant war. Then came the man who had the vision to change all of that. His name was Chanakya. He is history's ultimate strategist, and his story is unique. Even in an age of legendary heroes, it's a tale of sheer intellect and willpower. Imagine a civilian advisor who single-handedly builds one of the greatest empires in ancient South Asian history. That's our man. Chanakya studied at the ancient University of Taxila. Now, back then, higher education was mostly for warriors, so Chanakya had skills. When he heard about the ambition of a young warrior named Chandragupta, he decided to mentor him. Together, they would overthrow the Nanda dynasty, which ruled this region called This was around the 4th century BCE. Alexander had just left. The subcontinent was divided, ripe for conquest, and Chanakya knew exactly what to do. In 3 years, Chandragupta's army grew from a few thousand to 60,000 soldiers. It was a mix of infantry, cavalry, and war elephants. Discipline was everything, and Chandragupta was trained in the martial arts of the day. He could ride a horse, handle a bow and arrow, use all kinds of weapons. He was also smart enough to know he needed a good advisor. So Chandragupta and Chanakya became friends. Together, they marched across northern India, defeating kings and establishing new trade routes. Their plan was simple. They would take over one kingdom at a time, recruit local talent, and keep moving. Soon, their little alliance grew into an empire. Around 321 BCE, Chandragupta Maurya defeated Seleucus. Who was that? One of Alexander's generals. This guy actually went on to found the Seleucid Empire, ruling parts of Persia, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. But in the end, Seleucus lost to Chandragupta. And this was no small feat, because Seleucus had an army of 200,000 soldiers. What? How did Chandragupta win? Brilliant tactics. That's how, with fewer men, Chandragupta lured Seleucus into the forest near the Beas River. There, his army used guerrilla tactics. They ambushed supply chains, set traps, fled into the thick undergrowth, keeping out of range of the enemy. And it worked. This battle is considered the first recorded military engagement between India and the West. And guess what? Chandragupta won. Not only did he get control of the Indus Valley, but he also married a local princess, securing more alliances. This empire stretched all the way from the Arabian Sea to the Himalayas. After his conquests, Chandragupta sent an ambassador to Greece to meet with the king there. You see, Greece and India had never met like this before. Only merchants or pilgrims traveled between the two. But now diplomacy was underway. Here's what happened. Megasthenes, the ambassador, arrived in Pataliputra, the empire's capital. That's modern-day Patna in Bihar. And let me tell you, it was one of the biggest cities in the world back then. It had 4 walls, each with 6 gates. These protected the bustling city inside, and the streets were always full of activity. Elephant riders patrolled them to keep order. Plus, there were regular markets and even public bathrooms. Amenities aside, the real power was in the middle of the city. This is where Chandragupta lived in his magnificent palace made of brick and wood. In fact, it was surrounded by 9 smaller palaces, each housing one part of his government. Officials from all over the empire came here to meet with Some advised him on war and taxes. Others managed trade deals with neighboring kingdoms, but it all came down to Chanakya, the prime minister. He oversaw everything, from waging wars to writing books. Yes, this brilliant strategist also wrote one of the earliest known books on political science, The Art. It's a manual on how to run an empire, including the military, economy, and even spying. Here's a crazy thought. Back in the day, everyone thought that war was inevitable, right? Kings would go to war just because they could. But Chanakya had a different view. He said, peace is best, but if you have to go to war, win convincingly. And how do you do that? Through intelligence. Chanakya believed that espionage was just as important as combat, so his spies would infiltrate rival courts, steal secret plans, basically do anything to make sure the emperor was well informed. Even today, Chanakya's ideas are taught at management schools. He was that far ahead of his time. Now, during Chandragupta's rule, the empire thrived. Trade expanded, towns grew, and commoners got protection. When Chandragupta died, his son Bindusara took the throne. He was an ambitious ruler, but a bit insecure as well. Remember, this was a huge empire. Ruling over such vast lands was hard, so to keep control, Bindusara appointed loyal governors to oversee provinces, collect taxes, and enforce laws. This system helped maintain order, but it also helped spread culture across the empire. For example, people from the south started using Prakrit, a common language that was spoken in the north. They also began following the customs of the north. And this process worked both ways, slowly but surely. The Maurya Empire brought India together. However, it was Bindusara's son, Ashoka, who took this idea to the next level. Now, when he first came to power, Ashoka was a fiery warrior. He went on campaigns to conquer new lands. In fact, his empire reached its greatest extent during his rule, but something happened that changed him forever. His army marched south to the region of Kalinga, modern-day Orissa. It was a brutal campaign. Soldiers fought fiercely. Entire villages were wiped out. But why? What was so important about Kalinga? Well, imagine the pressure of uniting your entire country. That's what Ashoka felt. He wanted to bring his rule all the way to the ocean. Having control of the sea was vital. It meant more trade, more resources, and more power. But the king of Kalinga put up a tough fight. Ashoka's army was weakened, and his people were exhausted. And that's when he got a reality check. Waging war was not just about winning lands. It was also about losing countless lives. Soon after the war, Emperor Ashoka visited the region. He saw the devastation firsthand. It broke his heart. That's when he stopped being a ruthless conqueror and became the world's first pacifist monarch. Seriously, he renounced war forever. Instead, he focused on spreading Dharma, a mix of Buddhist values and good governance. And let me tell you, it was revolutionary. First off, he issued rock edicts, these moral political inscriptions across his empire. They covered everything from rights to duties, charity to honesty. Basically, they were like a constitution for everyone to follow. Second, he promoted non-violence. No more animal sacrifices. He even built hospitals for both humans and animals. Third, he invested in education and sent monks to learn from other religions. Buddhism flourished during his reign, and it spread to countries like Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Thailand. Remember the great stupas we told you about in our last video? Yeah, they started during Ashoka's reign. This was a golden age in Indian history, and it lasted for 30 years. Then came the decline. After Ashoka died, the empire became weak. His successors couldn't keep everything together. There were revolts, natural disasters, and invasions. Finally, around 185 BCE, the mighty Maurya Empire collapsed. But here's the thing. It lasted long enough to become legendary. People talked about it for centuries. In fact, it laid the groundwork for future Indian unification. Later rulers tried to copy the Maurya model. You know, the efficient administration, the focus on trade. They even set up similar universities. So, although the empire fell, its ideas didn't And that brings us to the end of this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to share it with a friend. It takes just a tap. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and join our growing community. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. The Maurya Empire, a classic example of how a great idea can triumph, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The dream of unifying the Indian subcontinent was like a beacon in the darkness, guiding Chandragupta and Chanakya to weave a tapestry of peace and prosperity from the mighty Himalayas to the warm embrace of the sea. Through the ages, their story echoes as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the flame of unity can burn bright, illuminating the path towards a better tomorrow.